Hi all, welcome to the R3 compound where we read and reflect for future relevance. Today in the internal edition of the R3 compound, we read a book summary from Blinkist. This is Creativity by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and this book basically talks about what you can do to be more creative, what creative individuals do differently, and what is creative flow. So basically, flow, he's also written a book called Flow. So he mentions that immersive mental state is where you feel totally focused and engaged and are enjoying the process is when you feel the flow. So in creativity, it happens within a system. So I'll just read out the summary quickly. The main points. Creativity happens within a system, and it is made up of a domain, a system, and a person. And uh, so some personality traits facilitate creativity, and we'll touch upon that briefly. And some common threads that apply to creative process are preparation, incubation, insight, evaluation, and elaboration. Then creative people experience flow while working, which makes goals more clear and time seems to stop. And then surroundings can also have a positive or a negative impact on creativity and the creative output. It also touches upon the myth of child prodigy, basically whether creativity is inborn or not. Creative people don't have traditional careers generally. They make their own career paths, and elderly creatives are more energized. That is also mentioned. Uh, Survival as a species depends on creativity, and how to harness creativity daily is also talked about in this summary. So we'll take up the takeaways that you guys have shared. So one of the takeaway that I think Harish mentions that it talks about domain. Harish, would you like to talk about your takeaway about the system?
Sure. Thanks, Ankita. So the book talks about what we call as the Holy Grail, right? I mean, the state of flow is the Holy Grail for everyone. What I found interesting in this summary was that the way he's broken down the characteristics of the state of flow means that it is something that we can very easily identify with. I'm sure even if we have not been at our creative best, where we have turned out Michelangelo kind of a creation, there have been times when each one of us has also been in that state of flow. And by breaking down that that state of flow, or at least the characteristics, by identifying those characteristics, we can actually have that. It's more encouraging. We can have that sense that we can also get into that state of flow. So that was very positive for me. The bigger takeaway for me was what he mentions in the first, the book summary, in the first couple of blinks that they mention about the access to domain. Being creative is great, but till you have access to the right domain or the right channel to take you to that right domain, you don't want to die like a Bach, where your masterpieces, all the greatest works of your life, are coming to the fore only after your death, right? So that was something which was interesting. Again, that is not something which is seen in the creative realm. Creators are not supposed to be the people who are getting worried about distribution. They're supposed to be worried only about creativity. For me personally, that was something which was very important. So either we figure out a distributor for ourselves, or also try to attack that problem in a creative manner, such that can we get more, or can we get a wider access to the domains that he's mentioning in the book summary. So that was an interesting takeaway for me.
Yeah, I found your takeaway quite creative. Like you, usually people think like creativity is about just finding the right solution, but it's also about identifying the right problems. So yeah, it was quite interesting. Ramanand, you also talk about domains, and you also talk about how you can get past the gatekeepers as well in a field. So would you like to talk about that, elaborate on that? Sorry, Ramanand, you will need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
In fact, I've owned this book for a long time. It's been lying on a top shelf somewhere, and I wonder why I haven't read it so far. It's because the summary was really good. So one thing I really liked about, again, the breaking up into domain, field, person was very interesting. And like Harish just said about access to the domain and the field. So the book says that gatekeepers often control that. There are experts on an area and so on. So I think these days with social networks like Reddit, Twitter, etc., I think if you're smart and you're willing to put yourself out there, then you have the ability to break past a lot of the gatekeepers in a field. So I think you see that all the time these days, wherein there are a bunch of people who are attacking a given area and are not necessarily experts, but they seem to often know a lot, if not more, about it than others. And so I think these are, so if you're not in Florence, you are not in the Silicon Valley, you are not in the hotbed of domain, looks like these days you can crack it even as being an outsider. So that I thought was very, very interesting in a modern setting for applying this book. The other thing I just wanted to quickly mention is that the treatment in the book was very different from a lot of books about creativity. That struck me a lot, because we've read a lot of books about creativity and it's usually the same kinds of things. But this again, I think shows the scientific treatment or near scientific treatment that someone like this author can bring to a topic like this. Yeah, thanks.
I also liked how you phrase that, like, to be prodigious in output, you don't need to be a prodigy. So yeah, the book talks about the prodigy myth. So it's basically anybody, you don't have to be born with creativity, you can cultivate it, like Harish mentioned. So some of the ways mentioned is curiosity. So and you also mentioned that it can happen later on in life for some people. So for children, I feel like curiosity, they're generally more curious, and when they grow up, their curiosity sort of declines because it's not cultivated or it's not encouraged. Schools, though emphasize on learning, they're more concerned with discipline. So what are some ways that parents can perhaps help cultivate curiosity in their children, so that they grow up to be creative individuals?
I think, like it says in the links also, right? The environment is extremely important to actually build that curiosity muscle, identify the right problems and defining those problems well and actually going about solving them. I think, at least my take as a parent of two kids, I strongly see that they don't see, they're not questioned, they're not challenged. It's more about a learning from a source kind of a thing, rather than applying what they know and using their creative muscle to solve something, to solve a problem. So that if environment, that actually shows how big a role environment plays in the whole creativity, in whole building up of the creativity process.
Right.
From ever since the lockdown started, for Agastya and his a group of 5 friends, they're very close friends from childhood. So I've been doing this 45-minute Zoom call with them every day, giving them something to do. Either some of basically giving them some of the Arvind Gupta puzzles, or showing them some videos and asking them some questions. So today I asked all of them to build an app for the kids. I said, build an app. So all of them have been in also doing some amount of cooking, and they want to share the recipes with each other and all of that. So I said, okay, build an app for kids where parents can find that app very safe for children to log in. And children are also getting to do a lot of things on that app. And I was actually surprised the kids continued discussing, and I dropped out after giving the problem statement to them. And I told them that we're going to, tomorrow they're all going to present to me. Jointly, all 5 of them are going to present that to me. So I was surprised that they had the discussion going on for almost 3.5 hours. and the kind of things that they came up with the app, including pricing and positioning, and how should the screen of the app look like, and what should be those catchy elements, what should be the name of the app. So all of these, I think they have absolutely no knowledge as of now of building an app, but this is from what all they have seen, what all they've observed, and what they've heard parents talking about. So that's where I think they've actually gone into solving a problem creatively.
Nice. It's interesting.
And when we asked Agastya to take a break for lunch, he actually used the word, "No, Dad, I'm in the flow right now."
Oh,
So
wow.
that is a testament to what we talked about today.
That's great. Okay. So yeah, Ramanand, you also mentioned Linus Pauling's quote in your takeaway. So yeah, that struck me as well. Like it's a very good addition to what is better known. So yeah, you can talk about that.
Sure. So I think we've all often heard of this famous Linus Pauling quote about, to get a great idea, you first try to get many ideas, and then the hope is that something great will emerge out of that. So you start with quantity. What I liked in this Blink summary was that they had chosen something which comes later, which they have that 5-part process about evaluation and elaboration. So Pauling actually talks about making sure that you're also able to evaluate your ideas, and I take it that the extended version of it would be that you can put some distance between that mode of generation and switch into a mode of analysis. I think most of the places that we work with, they don't see their workplaces or their work as necessarily creative spaces. So they're usually in the analytic mode, which means that they are quick to shoot down. They do self-censorship. They're quick to see what works negatively. So they always have that negative hat, the black hat on, in some sense. So I think it just goes back to the fact that you can separate out these modes, and everything has its place. And that if you are able to consciously go through that process and say that, the mode for, or the time for evaluation will come, then I think you can probably, like Pauling, maybe have a couple of great ideas in your life.
So the evaluation stage comes a little later, like what he mentions in the creative process. So for preparation, incubation, insight, evaluation would be like more concerned with whether your insight is valuable enough to be worked upon, right? So before that, should you not be concerned about the output as much? You should be focused more on the process of coming up with uh, any ideas, not shooting down whatever comes up. Like Sirisha mentioned, environment is important, to for the creative process. So what else do you feel could be helpful in um, you know for somebody to engage in a creative flow in preparation, incubation, insight, in these stages?
Sansi, maybe you want to go in first?
Yes, Ansi.
So one of the things I feel is this lack of any fear of failure, or the idea that this evaluation thing, if it is aimed at, if your creativity is dependent on whether you're going to be evaluated, I'm sure that will affect your creativity as well. So the ability to not be not being subjected to judgments or what in the early stages of your creative process would be a good encouraging way to, like I think Sirisha mentioned it, I was just taking a note of it, that not being questioned or not being challenged on while you're at it would be a good environment to have. And which itself, I think, since you asked more creative spaces in schools, is one of the reasons why everything is very evaluation oriented. There's nothing, there are outcomes and there are expectations. So creating a space where kids can just have their own space to explore without even the idea that something can be right or wrong or different or unusual is just putting extra barriers in creativity.
Right. So one of the the Bling mentions three things, three of the 9 elements of flow, but like I googled, so I found like one of the elements is no worry of failure. Like being in flow requires that you not be worried about failure, just be in the process and not worry about the output. So that's when the self-consciousness also disappears and time becomes distorted. So yeah, Omkar mentions that access to information matters a lot for somebody to be creative. So Omkar, uh, hello, hello.
Hi, Ankita.
Yeah, Omkar. You mentioned access to information matters a lot. Is that with regards to domain that you were mentioning? Your takeaway?
Right, yes. So, if you want to be creative or if you want to solve some problem creatively, you need to have some idea of the various approaches that people have tried in the beginning, people who have come before you, what they've tried, what are understandings of the domain. Otherwise, you set out to just reinvent the wheel from scratch all over again. And at best, it is going to get you to the same place that your peers are at. At worst, you stop before that and just give up saying this is going nowhere. So, having some idea of the difficulties that everyone is facing, having some idea of the approaches that people have taken to get to where they are, that definitely helps when it comes to being creative. Apart from that, like the summary says, there's a reason why we have seen epicenters of creativity throughout history. It mentions Florence in the Renaissance era, but closer to home, I can think of a lot of gharanas of classical music. Right? When you talk about classical music as a creative art or any form of classical art in the context of creativity, especially in India, we notice that there are these various schools or gharanas of performance. So, and this happens with vocal music, with all forms of art forms like dance, painting, even instrumental music. So, and all of these gharanas tend to be centered around one specific place, which used to be the hub for all the artists who wanted to pursue that style of music. So when you have that level of creative vibes flailing about in the air, for lack of a better term, it leads to an environment where almost everyone is on the same level when it comes to having the knowledge or having the baseline amount of knowledge to work with. And then depending on how you choose to interpret the various rules that are in play, some may choose to play within the boundaries, some may choose to challenge the boundaries and maybe toe the line, push the envelope just a little, and that leads to a vastly different kind of output, which can both be seen as creative, and while still following the same set of rules, they will still be very distinct in and of themselves.
Right. So, I think Stephen Johnson's book, Where Good Ideas Come From, also mentions liquid networks and how, just sharing your ideas can, you come up with new ideas like that by cross-referencing, cross-pollination and all. So, in that sense, within a domain, a lot of good ideas, new ideas can come, but what if you were to cross reference information from other domains?
That's actually a great place to look for ideas which might seem completely new, completely path-breaking sorts of ideas for a particular domain. For instance, in Decisive, the authors Chip and Dan Heath talk about how the Speedo suit was designed, the swimsuit.
Right.
And when the designer set out to create that swimsuit, they thought, let's make something which will help swimmers be faster, be more agile in water. And so instead of just looking to the previous designs that others in the domain had come up with, they decided to look at what other aquatic animals who are fast swimmers have adapted to or have evolved to aid them with that process. So then they ended up looking through various shapes, through various textures of the skins and things like that, and then ended up making a suit which sort of compressed the bodies of the swimmers to make it more streamlined, and also ended up putting a slightly rougher surface finish on the fabric to such that it resembled the skin of sharks instead of it being unusually smooth like all other previous versions of the suits were. And the difference was remarkable. It was so remarkable that I think they had to ban it in the Olympics because it gave an unfair advantage to people who use those suits.
Yeah.
So like you said, looking to other domains and looking to other people for cross-pollination of ideas can be a great strategy for inspiring creativity.
Right. Nice.
So I just wanted to add one more thing, which is that initially when I read the book, I was expecting to just read yet another creativity book, but I think the future relevance aspect which we care about was strongly there in the book, because they said that it's an essential component for future relevance. We have usually seen that way people have treated creativity in companies has been to organize a workshop and say, take some art supplies and kind of let loose. It's almost like discover your inner child, which is a good thing, but companies need to also get something out of that, because that's the kind of unstated assumption that all this will lead somewhere. What I found interesting is that our arenas, right? So we have these arenas about curiosity, about shaping culture that is forward looking, which is tolerant of failure, which threads together different strands, or even the social capital or the conversations part. I found a kind of connection to all those points in this one book, which again was not something I was expecting. So I think we ourselves have we know that social capital is something that we need to get better at ourselves, and we've been helping others do that as well. That is where those connection to those networks come up. We have all these mechanisms for very systematic curiosity, but there is so much that else that we can do around the social side of creativity, which I thought this book and what Omkar just said about these groups of people is something for us to really think about and help others as well achieve.
Yeah, that's where sessions like these also help. Like, we're just bouncing ideas off each other. Not just this, we're discussing ideas, we're coming up with more insights than if we just read the book. We're reflecting on what we've read. So yeah.
So one other part that I really liked, or it just struck me, was when you're in the flow, how your own feedback process works.
Oh, yes.
Where you're constantly looking at building on your own idea, and that's that state of flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and that surprisingly, that's the time when we're not biased about the feedback, when we're not resistant to feedback, when we actually look at making things better. And I think that's what it means to be in that state of flow.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, just a comment to add to what you have just said. When you're saying that by being in a state of flow, we are not very resistant to feedback, or we are not looking at feedback as a negative thing. I think one of the factors that influences this is also the fact that it is coming from the person themselves. Like, if I am in a state of flow, I'm giving myself some feedback on what I'm doing, which is immediate. Because if you are a musician and you are playing something in a state of flow, you immediately know if you have hit a wrong note. So it's not open for interpretation in your mind. Whereas if someone else comes and tells you that you hit a wrong note there, and you think it was the right note to hit, or it was the note that you wanted to hit, then it becomes a matter of resistance. Because the problem of not manufactured here is non-existent in the flow state. That factor of being
In fact, in that Barefoot Coach, I think everyone has read Barefoot Coach here. So there's an interesting additional thing. Obviously, the author in that book comes from a different area, which is a lot of physical and sporting field. And he mentions how physical, the lack of noise from your body, which is a state of either ill health or unfitness, helps you get into that state of flow. The more your body is distracting you from giving it your complete attention or giving it your complete energy. So these small things, I think it is very similar to what yoga also wants you to do to achieve enlightenment, is to stop your body from being a barrier to being in that state of flow. That's, I think, that was unique in what I read from that angle when it came to the topic of flow. But that's also something worth, I thought, was interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so we can move to the reflection question. I think we have more or less, yeah. When do you experience creative flow?
So, it's actually strange how infrequently and how surprisingly you can achieve flow. I think a lot of knowledge workers struggle to get into flow because it's uninterrupted time is hard to find. A lot of it is not novel, so every time you're trying to do something a little different, so it's not the same thing over and over again. Therefore, there are lots of obstacles. You have to stop, pause, think, get distracted. I've noticed that some kinds of physical activities, like you run, you're at the absolute edge of what you can do. That is something I get into flow quite well. And sometimes just writing or just putting together a presentation, right, or putting together something is surprisingly something I get into flow with when I end up trying to assemble something, because in some sense you're kind of lost in that universe. So I think these are two cases I've seen where flow happens, and it is not very easy to engineer. It just happens.
So
Ramanand, if I just had to
yeah, okay.
summarize what you said, do you mean to say that you experience a state of flow when you have an end goal in mind, i.e. putting something together or making something which you have a mental picture of, and then you are doing a few things creatively along during that process, whereas where you are creating something which does not originally exist, which allows you to be in a state of flow? Is that what you meant to say?
A little bit like that. I think instead of the final goal, I know what the next step is. So for example, I see this while you are editing someone's work. What the next line should be like. You have a mental picture of that maybe. And that is interesting. It's the overall thing, but broken down into smaller pieces. So it's the same thing like, say, running or walking at the absolute edge of your paths, wherein the next step has to be taken, but there is this larger goal as well. And each of those steps can kind of thread together that feeling of continuation.
Like sort of mini goals throughout, not the final output that you need to be focusing on. The level of challenge, the author also mentions in flow that the level of challenge has to be should almost match your level of skills. So yeah, that's a great point. Okay, anybody else? When do you experience? Yes, Sirisha.
Yeah, for me, like Ramanandan mentioned, there's no specific time of the day that I'm in that state of flow. It doesn't happen too often also. But there are certain activities, it gets very difficult for me to get to it. But once I get to it, I know I can get into that state of flow. So that comes when I'm painting or drawing or sketching something. Very difficult for me to start. So it's not something that I can think and say, okay, every week let me make one painting. That just doesn't happen, is what I realized. I need to be in that zone. And the other part that I also realized when it comes to work is when I know what should be the end impact or the outcome, and I know the context. So that's when probably for a few days I don't see any output. There's no work happening, but there's a lot of thinking happening. And suddenly that aha moment comes.
Yeah.
And after that is a state of flow where, your physical energy just doesn't matter. You tend to overlook all of that to actually do it. So just to give an example, it just happened to me on Friday. I had a presentation to make on Saturday, which I was working on from the previous week, and had a lot of it in place, but still was not convinced about the impact that it would create. And suddenly Friday night, 11 o'clock, I just get that aha moment about how I want that presentation to be. And then I was working all night to present it the next day. I completely changed the entire presentation that I wanted to make. And the impact, end output was the end outcome was what I intended it to be. But yeah, so for me, if I have clarity of the end outcome that I want,
you'll find your way.
I'll get into that flow, but I don't know. I can't commit a time, or I can't say that, what, if I know the end outcome, I can do it in a couple of days.
But
it needs a lot of that time.
Yeah, but like you mentioned, like environment matters. So do you create an environment around yourself, like no distractions, no nothing, maybe Pomodoro or something like that? So to get into that.
So when I'm in that state of flow, that's when I isolate myself, or I think that's when, even if there are people around, I can isolate myself. When I'm in that state of flow. So I don't need that quieter environment, but there's a lot of thinking process that keeps going on in the background all the rest of the time, so
the incubation stage.
Yeah.